Hello and welcome back to Ace Chat. It is May, I think like the last day of it, but still May, which means it is Mental Health Awareness Month. And sort of in the same vein as last month when I talked about Asexuality for Sexual Assault Awareness Month, I wanted to spend some time today speaking about mental health, asexuality, and the ways in which they intersect, and also some unique mental health obstacles that asexuals go through, some ways in which they need support and are just not getting it. To start off, I'm going to be covering mental health today in fairly general terms, and I'm going to mention mental illness, but in the future I want to have a video specifically about mental illness and asexuality, because there's a lot of misconceptions, there's just a lot to cover there. So for this first one though, I wanted it to kind of lay the groundwork and be accessible for people who don't have mental illness or who are just newer to this conversation about mental health in general. And I think the best way to segue into this conversation is to bring up last week. Last week was the first time I have not posted a video so far, and it was because I was going through my own mental health things. I was very stressed, was just overwhelmed, had a bunch going on, and I just needed a second. I've spoken before about having a disability, and at least I think I have. I have hyperacusis, and when I am just worn out and stressed and my mental health is not great, it can actually exacerbate it, make it worse. So I just needed to take some time to myself, just needed to get my emotions better balanced, just think some things through and just take a breather. And I bring this up partially just to explain about last week, but also because I was very fortunate. I was fortunate that this is a volunteer project that I report to myself. So I was able to take that time. I didn't have to question whether anyone else would take me seriously if I said, hey, I have this mental health thing going on and I need a breather. A lot of people, ace and allo, feel like they can't acknowledge mental health issues because they won't be taken seriously, they won't be respected, they won't be understood. And quite frankly, that's awful. So you might be sitting there like nodding your head like, yeah, we need to take mental health more seriously, agreed, but how does asexuality factor into this conversation? Well, I am going to tell you a story, and that story is called The Time Marissa Went to a Therapist because she was dealing with some mental health concerns, and the therapist made her question her whole identity, and she felt invalidated and her mental health suffered as a result. And this is a long title, but point made, right? This was back in 2012, 2013-ish. I had recently started identifying as ace, and I was a college student. I was going through a lot of stressful things related to just getting assignments done and worried about the future and just, fairly typical sounding stressors, and I wanted help. So I scheduled an appointment with a therapist. I went to the therapist, and I don't remember how the conversation led to this, but I told him I was ace. And somehow, suddenly, my stressors were not related to being in school, according to him. They were related to my asexuality. My inability to sleep, because I was having trouble staying asleep, just general kind of insomnia. Not because of the test I was taking, not because of these self-imposed pressures, not because of these greater societal pressures to do well in school. No, it was my asexuality. Who knew? And this is where it gets worse, because don't you know, according to him, that not only was this affecting me now, but the future cause of any worry I might feel, any despair, any loneliness, just anything at all that was like a mental health, no, it was all going to be a result of my asexuality. Or according to him, of my insistence that I was asexual when asexuality wasn't really a thing. He literally said, you cannot form a connection with a man unless you have sex with him. To which I was like, first of all, That is a heck of a conversation to have with any man in your life with whom you are not sexually involved. Second of all, way to assume I'm straight, buddy? But it didn't stop there, right? He also suggested that it was my fault that I was unhappy, that any unhappiness I felt was my fault because I was pretending to be this thing that wasn't real, because I was insisting that I was fine and happy. I was in denial. And until I admitted I was in denial and he wanted me to take some medication, and he wanted to like have more sessions with me where we'd talk about this. Until I committed myself to that, I was just gonna stay stressed and not sleep well, and just it's gonna be a hard time for me and my little lying self. What sucks about this though is I was not like this back then, right? I was much more prone to believing things that were just told to me, just thinking like, oh, you know, does he have a point? And I remember I walked out of his office and I was just in a daze, and I started questioning like, well, what if I am lying to myself? What if this thing that I finally was feeling comfortable with isn't true? What if I am the cause of my own unhappiness because I will not accept the truth of my sexual orientation because I'm pretending or misguided and think it's something else? So yeah, I went to a mental health professional to improve my mental health, to have it nosedive. Great. I do want to take a second to say there are a lot of good mental health professionals out there, but a lot of them are lacking the basic knowledge of what asexuality is, the basic knowledge of how to converse with someone asexual, how to have a chat, right? They don't have the resources or skills or knowledge to effectively help someone who's trying to figure themselves out, who's maybe trying to react to people who are discrediting them and invalidating them and making them feel alone or othered. So I'm definitely not saying don't go to a therapist. I am saying, therapists, we need to figure something out. And the reason why I am making such a big deal out of this is because my story is not unique. A lot of aces struggle with mental health, and they struggle with it for like, you know, the normal reasons, like they just got a lot going on in their life and they're overwhelmed, or they had this like traumatic event happen and they're responding to it and, you know, it's upsetting. But then there are some ways in which their mental health struggles overlap with the LGBTQIA community, and there are some ways in which their struggle is even unique outside of that. A lot of aces struggle with this question of how to come out and how coming out will be received. They also struggle with this self-doubt where they're constantly questioning like, well, if the rest of the world is questioning me, maybe they're onto something. What if I'm mistaken? What if in however many years I wake up and my experience changes? Does that mean I've just been wrong this whole time? Should I just assume I'm wrong to begin with? Add to that discrimination and prejudice are not good for mental health. And not only do aces experience it a lot from straight people, not all straight people, but a lot of straight people, but they also experience it from a lot of the LGBTQIA community. Much in the same way that a lot of bisexuals are told you're only straight or you're only gay and you're actually lying. A lot of aces are told that's not a real thing, or they're told, well, your struggles aren't the same as ours, so you're not really part of our community. And when it is this hard to find your community, when there are so few platforms, such little representation, to then be denied access to this greater LGBTQIA community, it's just kind of like, so what, I'm like too queer for straight people and I'm not queer enough for queer people? It's kind of like, it echoes this idea where people are like, asexuals don't really exist, but also I'm reading all this stuff where people talk about being ace, and like, why do you have to shove it in my face? Why can't you be quiet about it? I don't care about this. Just like go away and stop talking about it. So it's like, are we here and queer, or are we straight and fake? That was the dumbest thing I'm ever gonna say. It didn't even rhyme. Anyway, I think I should end today's video with some hard facts. Because a story is one thing, sharing our stories is so important, but it's also important to remember that they are part of this larger narrative. Again, my story is not unique, and there's a lot of evidence showing that mental health within the asexual community is something we need to focus on more. In 2017, 2018, there was this ACE census, and it showed that a third of the asexual respondents had felt suicidal at some point during the year. And of those third of the respondents, half of them had attempted suicide at some point during that year. In 2020, the Trevor Project came out with a survey. And this survey showed that asexuals, even amongst LGBTQIA individuals in general who already had elevated rates, asexuals had especially elevated rates of anxiety and depression. There are other sources I can cite, but here's something else to consider. The fact that there's not that much research out there, right? Because there's not that much knowledge, there's not that much understanding. There's just not that many people interested in even like looking this stuff up. But all the research I found, and I doubt this is a unique experience, all the research I found shows that these patterns persist, that asexuals need mental health support and they are not getting it. I think in summary, all I can say is we need to take mental health seriously, we need to take asexuality seriously, and we need to stop conflating the two, and we have to stop discrediting actual mental health concerns as a result of asexuality. But then when people's reactions to asexuality are causing mental health concerns, we still need to make sure we take those as credible, as something that we need to address. If you are having any mental health concerns, please check the description box down below. There are some resources there. Whether you're ace or allo, those can be useful. And if you are specifically feeling lonely because of being ace and not knowing any other aces, or you're feeling overwhelmed because you're like, what if this label fits? I don't know what to think. This is all new, because new is scary, new can be scary. Please also check the links down beneath those links, because those are links to some ACE communities, some ACE stories that might help you with your search, might help with your questions, might help with your mental health. On a final note, I don't want anyone feeling like they can't reach out to professionals if they're facing some sort of crisis, or even just if something's been going on for a long time and they just want to talk to someone. There are so many good therapists out there. It's just, we deserve for it to be all of them. And so thank you to the therapists and psychologists and psychiatrists who are making space for the ACE community, for ACE patients, who are doing the research, who are trying to be understanding, who are trying to be helpful and supportive. And again, anyone who is ACE or questioning, who is afraid maybe you'll have that same experience that I had, if you do, you can leave. You can never go back to that therapist and seek out a new one. And I know I'm making therapy sound overly simplistic because in various countries it's expensive or hard to access, or you might just not find someone who's that friendly to the ACE community. If that's the case, there are still some other resources. I'm going to try and add a few down below. And sometimes joining these forums, reading these stories, it does the work you need while you're trying to figure out this more long-term professional solution. So anyway, this has been Ace Chat. As always, if you have a topic you want to see covered, please reach out to us at acechathats@gmail.com or comment down below. Also, if you'd like to volunteer, if you'd like to share your own story, reach out to us at that email, or I guess comment down below. Just please, any comments are always welcome. Likes are welcome. Subscribing, following, whatever it's called here, is also appreciated. Make sure to follow us too on Instagram and Twitter. And keep checking back, because we're going to have another interview next week. Then we'll probably have something light and fun after that, because I feel like I've talked about a lot of serious topics. And yeah, then more interviews, more discussions, just any and everything about asexuality. So yeah, thanks for joining the chat, and can't wait to continue the conversation. Bye.